I pretended to leave town, parked my truck 2 blocks away, and followed my wife to Memphis. When she walked into that hotel with another man, I knew what I had to do. I knocked, set my plan in motion, and watched their little world tremble. But the real blow came moments later. Before I reveal the next twist, hit subscribe and drop your city in the comments. I want to know how far this tale moves across the world. Now let me take you back to the moment everything began to unravel. My name is Silas Brooks, born and raised in Pine Ridge, Alabama. 74 years old now. Still carrying the same pocket watch my daddy gave me the day I opened my first forge. I ran Brooks Fabrication for half a century, welding everything from cattle gates to custom ironwork folks drove from 2 counties over to buy. Most men slowed down at my age, but I never did. Not until my hands started stiffening in the winter cold and my son, Jonah, began taking over the business. I always believed my life was steady, predictable, maybe even blessed. I married Mabel when I was 26. She was soft-spoken, educated, the kind of woman you listen to when you needed a sensible voice. Together we raised Jonah and our daughter Leah. We built a home on the ridge, a place with creaking wooden floors and a porch that held every memory worth keeping, birthdays, celebrations, Sunday meals, and a few arguments that now feel too small to matter. But peace has a way of hiding storms underneath it. And I didn't know the clouds had been gathering for years. Mabel started changing in ways too subtle for most men to notice, but a man who loves deeply notices everything. Her knitting group suddenly met twice a week instead of once. Her church gatherings stretched late into the night. Her hair appointments became more frequent. She guarded her phone like it contained state secrets, keeping it face down at dinner, silencing it whenever I walked in the room. When I make small jokes about her being busier in retirement than she ever was while working, she'd laugh quickly. Too quickly, brushing it away with a wave of her hand. Still, I pushed doubt aside. After nearly 5 decades together, doubt feels like betrayal. So you ignore it until you can't. The crack I couldn't ignore happened one Tuesday night. I woke up alone in bed. It wasn't unusual for her to get water or read a bit, but when minutes stretched too long, I went looking for her. I found her in the dark kitchen lit only by the glow of her phone screen, smiling down at something she quickly hid when she realized I was there. "You scared me, Silas," she said, clutching her chest. "Who were you talking to?" I asked gently. "Leah," she said without hesitation. She was having trouble sleeping. The next morning I casually asked Leah if she was okay. "Sleeping fine, Dad," she said. "Why?" I didn't push, but I felt something settle my gut, not a sharp pain, but a slow, cold certainty. Soon after, she joined a senior computer class in Memphis. I offered to drive her. She said she preferred to take the bus, so she'd have time to read and relax. That didn't sit right with me. Neither did the new dresses. Neither did the perfume I didn't recognize. Neither did the hotel charge I found on her credit card statement from Jackson, on a day she told me she hadn't even left Pine Ridge. Little lies stack on each other, like thin sheets of metal. Light at first, but stack enough and they become heavy. Then came the week I was supposed to visit my brother in Memphis. I packed my bag, kissed Mabel goodbye, and watched her wave from the doorway. But halfway down the main road, my nephew called. Curtis had been admitted to the hospital. Visitors restricted until further notice. I should have turned around and told Mabel the truth. Instead, something inside me, something years in the making, whispered, "Keep driving. Let's see what she does." I parked near my shop and stayed out of sight. Jonah noticed a truck and raised an eyebrow. "Thought you were heading out, Pops." "Change of plans," I said. "Just don't mention seeing me today." He didn't pry. Jonah's good like that. Loyal to the bone. Hours crawled by. I waited. I tried to calm myself down, telling myself I was acting foolish. That Mabel wouldn't be doing anything wrong. That I'd get home early, surprise her with dinner, and laugh at my own paranoia. But by 3 p.m., my nerves were knots. I needed to know. I drove home, parked a block away, and crept into the back gate. Silence. Her car was gone. My heart thudded. Mabel never went out on Wednesdays. She watched reruns of her favorite shows then. I checked the bedroom. The bed was neatly made. The bathroom counters had gaps where items were missing. Makeup, perfume, a few hair products. My stomach tightened. Her phone? Gone too. I waited for 2 hours before calling her. Straight to voicemail. I called Leah. She hadn't heard from her. I called a few of Mabel's friends. None knew where she was, though a couple sounded uneasy, like they were trying too hard not to say something. By evening, fear chewed at me. I went to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Mullins told me gently that it hadn't been 24 hours. Couldn't file a missing report yet, but he looked worried. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, exhausted and desperate, I rummaged through her desk. Among grocery lists and old receipts, I found her small notepad, the one she always carried. Inside, written on several random dates, was a single name, Art. My chest tightened. Who the hell was Art? On the back cover was a phone number in pencil. I dialed it. A man answered with a calm, deep voice. Hello. I froze. Hello? Who is this? I hung up. I knew that voice wasn't family. Wasn't church. Wasn't anyone from Pine Ridge. I called Jonah. I need a ride to Memphis, I said. He heard something in my voice, something he didn't question. I'm on my way. We checked 8 hotels before a receptionist, hesitant but honest, finally admitted a woman matching Mabel's description had checked in under the name Mabel Ray. Her maiden name. She's with a gentleman, the girl whispered. Room 214. My blood ran cold. I waited across the street in a cafe, watching the entrance. Hours passed. Then her car pulled in. She stepped out, laughing like she hadn't laughed with me in years. A tall, well-dressed man got out on the driver's side. Silver hair, confident smile, hand on her waist. I felt the world tilt. They entered the hotel together. Everything inside me trembled, not with sadness, but with a quiet, focused fury I hadn't felt since my younger days. The kind that doesn't explode, the kind that calculates. I waited 1 full hour before crossing the street. The receptionist gave a subtle nod. I climbed the stairs. My feet felt heavy, like someone had tied bricks to my ankles. At room 214, I raised my hand and knocked hard enough to silence whatever laughter was happening inside. Everything went quiet. Footsteps. A hushed voice. Movement. Then the door cracked open. And there she was, my wife of 48 years, staring at me as if she'd seen a ghost. Silas, she whispered, her face draining of color. And behind her, the man straightened his shirt. That was the moment I knew everything in my life was about to change, and that I would make sure the truth came crashing down exactly the way it needed to. For a moment, none of us moved. The hallway felt too quiet, like the whole hotel had stopped breathing. Mabel's fingers tightened around the doorframe before she finally forced a trembling smile, the kind a person gives when they've been caught but aren't ready to admit what they've done. Silas, what are you doing here? She stammered. I could ask you the same, I said, stepping inside. My voice was calm, too calm. I didn't trust myself to feel anything yet. Arthur Beaumont stood near the window, straightening his cuffs, trying to compose himself. He was older than I expected, maybe early 70s, fit, well-groomed, the type of man who spent his life being listened to. His eyes darted between us like he was searching for a dignified exit. Mabel, he said softly, should I give you two some privacy? She looked back at him with something I couldn't immediately define. Maybe guilt, maybe fear, maybe a little protectiveness. No, I said before she could answer. I think it's best we talk while all three of us are here. Clears the air quicker. Mabel flinched as though she'd been slapped. Good. Lies rot in the shadows. The daylight makes them shrivel. She motioned stiffly for me to sit, but I didn't. My feet felt planted to the floor, rooted by 48 years of shared memories I no longer recognized. Silas, she said, swallowing hard. I can explain. I'm listening. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her eyes drifted toward Arthur again. He stepped forward, clearing his throat. Mr. Brooks, I need you to understand. I didn't know. Mabel told me she was widowed, that her husband passed away 2 years ago. If he'd shot me, I don't think I would have felt it as sharply. A widow? I repeated, blinking slowly. Is that right, Mabel? That's the story you've been telling. Her shoulders sagged. She sank onto the edge of the bed like her bones had suddenly weakened. I didn't mean for it all to go this far, she whispered. It became easier to let him believe what he believed. So you kill me off like an expired character in a bad novel? My voice trembled, but not from sadness, from disbelief. You let the world think I was dead so you could play dress-up as someone new? It wasn't like that, she insisted, her voice cracking. I just needed space. A different life. Somewhere I wasn't responsible for everything, every minute. You don't understand how heavy it became. Then why not talk to me? Why not tell the truth? Why this? I gestured around the room. Mabel's eyes filled with tears, but something felt wrong about them. They weren't the tears of regret. They were the tears of a person who regretted being caught. Arthur ran a hand over his face, the weight of it all sinking in. Mabel, he said gently but firmly, you told me he died of a heart attack. You showed me photos, old ones, and said you were moving forward. Mabel's eyes widened. Arthur, please. No, he said, stepping back. I deserve honesty too. I let the silence stretch. Let them squirm in it. 2.5 years, Arthur continued, shaking his head. That's how long we've been seeing each other. And all this time, good Lord, Mabel. She bowed her head like a child being scolded. But whether she was ashamed of her actions or ashamed she'd been cornered, I couldn't tell. I turned toward her. 2.5 years? She nodded slowly. So while I was home building new shelves, helping Joan at the shop, watching our grandchildren on weekends, thinking our marriage was just going through a quiet phase, you were here, living as a widow, reinvented, free. Her lips trembled. Silas, I mean. Yes, I cut in. You did. Everything you did was intentional. You crafted an entire life without me. A second identity. I stared at the suitcases in the corner, neatly packed. 2 toothbrushes on the bathroom counter. A pair of his slippers near the window. You were planning to spend the week here, I said softly, with him, while I was supposed to be 100 miles away visiting my brother. Her silence was admission enough. Arthur sank into the armchair, exhausted. Mabel, why? Why didn't you just tell me the truth? She wiped at her cheeks, smeared mascara darkening her fingers. Because if I told you I was married, you wouldn't have stayed. And if I told Silas I wasn't happy, I'd lose the life I had in Pine Ridge. I didn't want to start over at my age. And yet, I said quietly, you started over anyway. You just didn't have the courage to admit it. She shook her head violently. No, Silas, it wasn't courage. It was fear. Fear of being judged. Fear of being the woman who walked away after 48 years. Fear of losing the respect I earned in Pine Ridge. People look up to me there. They trust me. I couldn't ruin all that. So you ruined me instead, I said calmly. That was an easier option. Her shoulders began trembling. I never wanted to hurt you. You didn't mind rewriting my death certification. I replied sharply. So don't pretend concern now. Arthur stood, his voice firmer now. Mr. Brooks, I swear to you, I would never have stepped into this if I'd known. I thought I was courting a grieving widow. I had no idea she had a husband alive and well in Pine Ridge. For a moment, I studied him. His eyes looked stunned, genuine. In a strange way, he and I were both victims of the same lie. This isn't on you, I told him. I've been married to this woman for decades. If I didn't see it, how could you? Mabel covered her face with both hands and sobbed. Not the quiet, remorseful sobs of someone owning their wrongdoing. These were chaotic, panic sobs. The kind that spill out when a house of cards is collapsing, and the person who built it finally realizes it's too late to stop the fall. I let her cry. My silence wasn't mercy. It was precision. When she finally lifted her head, eyes red and wild, she whispered, Silas, what are you going to do? Do? I echoed thoughtfully. I'm going to go home. She blinked, and then, that depends, I said, keeping my voice even. On whether you want to keep pretending or whether you want to live in the truth for once. Her lips parted, but no words came. I looked toward Arthur. You might want to have someone drive Mabel back when she's ready. He nodded, ashamed. I walked toward the door. But before leaving, I paused and looked back at the two of them. You know what the cruelest part is? I said softly. I didn't come here to catch her. I came here hoping I was wrong. Then I stepped out into the hallway, closed the door behind me, and let the click of the latch seal 48 years of my life on the other side. Walking to the elevator felt like walking on new legs, shaky, unfamiliar, but strangely liberating. Outside, the evening breeze hit me. It smelled like Memphis, hot asphalt, barbecue smoke, and something else. Something sharp. Something clean. Truth. I didn't know what my next move would be, but I knew this. I wasn't going to collapse. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to chase. I was going to dismantle the lies the same way I dismantled old machinery in my shop, piece by piece, silently, skillfully, and with a steady hand no one suspected an old man like me still had. The drive back to Pine Ridge felt longer than any road I had ever traveled in my 74 years. The hum of the tires, the blur of trees along the highway, the weight pressing on my chest, they all melded into one long, hollow ache. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger was sharp and hot. What I felt now was something colder, quieter, and infinitely heavier. By the time I pulled into Jamal's driveway, the sun had dropped low behind the trees, spreading an orange glow across the yard. I sat in the truck for a minute, gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady myself. I had rehearsed what I'd say to my son. None of the words sounded right in my head, but I knew I had to speak them anyway. The front door opened before I even stepped out. Jamal jogged down the steps, concern etched deep across his face. Dad? You okay? You didn't call. We were worried. I swallowed. I'm here, son. But things ain't right. He didn't need more explanation. He saw it in my posture, my eyes. He placed a steadying hand on my shoulder and guided me into the house. Leah, his wife, stood from the kitchen table, wiping her hands on a towel, her expression shifting from relief to fear in seconds. What happened, Mr. Silas? She asked gently. I sat down. The chair creaked beneath me like even it understood the weight I carried. Your mama, my throat tightened. I tried again. She's been lying to me for a long time. Jamal pulled out a chair and sat across from me, bracing himself. Leah hovered near him, clasping his hand. Their quiet unity dug into me, because that's what I thought Mabel and I had once been. A team, a partnership, a life shaped together. I took a breath and started from the afternoon, following her trail, the hotel clerk, the room, Arthur Beaumont, the truth. As I spoke, the room grew colder. Like each word I released lowered the temperature another degree. When I finished, Jamal's fists were clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. She told people you were dead, he whispered, disbelief thick in his voice. My mama told a man you died 2 years ago. I said quietly, said I had a heart attack. Leah covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Oh, Lord. Jamal stood abruptly, pacing. I can't believe this. I can't, Dad. She wouldn't. How could she after everything you two built? I shook my head slowly. I don't know, son, but it happened. I saw it with my own eyes. He stopped pacing. What now? Are you coming back home? Staying here? What do you want to do? That was a question burning in my chest. What did I want? I'm not going back to that house tonight. I said firmly. I can't spend 1 hour under that roof. Too many lies stitched into the walls. You'll stay here, Jamal said immediately. Not a suggestion. An order of love. Our couch pulls out. Or take my room. I'll sleep out here. No, I said gently. I'll take the couch. I won't be any trouble. Dad, you're not trouble, he said fiercely. You're family. Leah nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. You're staying as long as you need. I tried to thank them, but the words clogged in my throat. Instead, I just nodded. That night, while Jamal and Leah tried to give me space, I sat alone on their porch, listening to cicadas buzz in the warm Mississippi air. My hands trembled, not from age, but from the aftershock of truth. 48 years with a woman, and I had known only half of her. I didn't know how long I sat there before I heard footsteps behind me. Jamal sank into the chair beside mine, folding his arms. I keep thinking about Mom, he said quietly, trying to understand what she was thinking. I can't. None of this makes sense. I didn't respond. I wasn't sure any answer existed. We gotta tell Zoe, he added after a long moment. My chest tightened. I know, but not tonight. Let her sleep one more night in peace before everything breaks. Jamal nodded. We sat in silence a while longer before he finally spoke again. What about Arthur? What's he like? I leaned back, exhaling. He's a quiet man. Polite. Seemed decent. I don't hold anything against him. He didn't know. You think they'll stay together? A bitter laugh escaped me. I honestly don't know, son. They're both standing in a pile of lies right now. Hard to build a future on that. Jamal leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring into the darkness. You know, I always thought you and Mom were the example. The couple who made it. The proof marriage could last. I closed my eyes for a moment. His words sliced deeper than he intended. I thought so too, I whispered. But sometimes people hide cracks, so well even they forget the cracks are there. Jamal didn't speak after that. He just reached over and put his hand on my shoulder, steady, supportive, protective. My son, my anchor. That night, I lay on their couch staring at the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mabel laughing with Arthur, moving around that hotel room with the comfort of someone who had lived there before. Someone who had built a routine there. Someone who belonged there. Sleep didn't come. Not really. Just a haze of restless thoughts and jagged dreams. By morning, I felt older than ever. Zoe arrived before noon the next day, after Jamal called and told her she needed to come. She rushed through the door, her face pale with worry. Daddy, she breathed. What happened? Jamal said it was urgent. I motioned for her to sit. My hand shook again as I poured her a glass of water. Zoe, I began, there's something you need to know about your mama. Jamal sat beside her, bracing for the storm. I told the story again. Slower this time. More details. By the end, Zoe wasn't crying. She was shaking with anger. No, she kept whispering. No, Mama wouldn't do that. She can't just erase you and pretend, Daddy, she loves you. She always did. Love don't lie like that, I said softly. Zoe covered her face with both hands. Why? Why would she do this? She could have talked to us. She could have been honest. She could have asked for space, anything. I don't know, I said, but she didn't. Zoe suddenly stood. Where is she? Probably on her way back to Pine Ridge. Jamal replied. She left the hotel after Dad. Zoe grabbed her purse and keys. I'm going over there. I need to hear her say it. No, I said firmly. Let me handle this. She froze. Daddy, I'll talk to her, I said again, but not today. Not while my heart still feels like glass. Zoe's shoulders collapsed. She sank onto the couch beside me and wrapped her arms around me. She hadn't hugged me like that since she was a child. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry this happened to you. I held her close. It didn't happen to just me. You lost something too. She nodded against my shoulder. Our family, all four of us, had been knocked off center. The foundation we stood on for decades had cracked, shattered, and I knew something with painful clarity. Even if forgiveness someday touched the edges of our hearts, nothing would go back to the way it was. The truth was out now. Once truth arrives, it never leaves. By evening, I was back on the porch. The wind was slow and warm. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The world kept turning, even if mine felt like it stalled. That's when my phone buzzed. Mabel. Her name on the screen hit me like a stone. I stared at it a long moment, debating whether to answer. Jamal noticed. You don't have to pick up. I shook my head. I know. The phone buzzed again. I finally pressed it to my ear. Her voice came through, fragile and hoarse. Silas, please, can we talk? I'm home. I need you to come back so we can fix this. Fix. Such a small word for such a colossal break. I didn't raise my voice when I answered. Mabel, I'm not coming home tonight. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not ever. She gasped softly. Silas, please don't say that. You made a second life, I said quietly. Maybe it's time you live in it. Her breath hitched. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But I need you. I love you. You're my husband. No, I said, my voice stilled by truth. Your husband died of a heart attack in Memphis, remember? Silence. Long, sharp, suffocating silence. When she finally spoke, her voice broke. Please, Silas, don't give up on us. Not after everything. I closed my eyes, letting the pain swell and settle. Good night, Mabel. And I hung up. For the first time in 48 years, I felt the weight of freedom. Freedom that burned. Freedom that healed. Freedom that demanded something of me. The old Silas might have waited. Might have forgiven overnight. Might have gone home to smooth things over. But the man sitting on that porch, the man who just buried a version of himself in Mabel's lies, that man knew better. This wasn't about saving a marriage. This was about reclaiming a life. The next morning came heavy and gray, the kind of Mississippi morning that drapes itself over the world like a damp wool blanket. I sat alone on Jamal's porch swing, listening to the low rumble of distant thunder. My bones felt older than the wood beneath me. I hadn't slept much, just drifted in and out of shallow rest where memories mix with heartbreak. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mabel in that hotel doorway, hair loose, blouse unfamiliar, surprise flashing across her face the same moment my entire world split in two. Around 7, Jamal stepped outside with 2 steaming mugs. He handed me one and sat beside me. Daddy, he said quietly. Mom texted me, asked if you were coming home. I sipped the bitter coffee. What did you tell her? That I didn't know, and that she should give you space. I nodded. The swing creaked beneath us. The world felt strangely still. She'll come here next, I said. She won't stay away. Jamal stared at the gravel driveway, jaw tight. Do you want her to come? I thought about that for a long moment. No, I answered honestly. But she will anyway. She's not the type to sit with her guilt. She'll try to explain it away, dress it up, wrap it in excuses. Jamal rubbed his forehead. Daddy, what are you going to do? About the house? The marriage? Everything. I don't know yet. I admitted, but I know I can't go back to pretending nothing's wrong. He nodded. You shouldn't. We sat there until Leah came out to call him inside. They had errands to run. I told them I'd be fine alone. But I wasn't alone for long. Not an hour later, a car pulled into the driveway. Mabel stepped out, still in yesterday's clothes, hair pulled back in a hasty knot, eyes swollen from crying. Her shoulders sagged like the way her choices pressed directly onto her spine. She walked slowly toward the porch. Silas, she whispered. Please. I didn't stand. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs. Can I come up? I stared straight ahead. You can talk from there. She swallowed hard, her throat bobbing. I didn't mean for things to get this far. That's the problem. I said evenly. You meant for it to happen at all. Tears filled her eyes again. I was lonely. After retirement, after the kids left home, I felt empty. I felt invisible. I closed my eyes briefly. So your answer was to lie? To build another life? To kill me off like an inconvenience? I didn't kill you, she whispered. You told another man I was dead. I said, if that ain't killing, it's close enough. She flinched. I didn't know how to stop, she continued. Every lie needed another to keep it standing. And by the time I realized what I created, it was too late to undo. You could have told the truth, I replied. Truth might hurt, but it doesn't rot. Her shoulders trembled. Silas, I never stopped loving you. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. You love me so much you erase me? You don't understand, she pleaded. I didn't want to lose our life in Pine Ridge. I didn't want to disappoint the kids. I didn't want anyone to think less of me. So you lie to everyone instead. I was trying to protect what we had. No, I said, you were protecting the image of yourself that you liked best. She took a shaky breath. I want to fix this. You can't fix 48 years with a handful of apologies. I'll do anything, she whispered. Please come home. I finally turned to look at her. Really look. Her face, once familiar, once cherished, looked different now. The softness I loved was still there, but beneath it rested a hardness I had never seen. A selfishness that had grown roots I never noticed. You didn't just betray me, I said quietly. You betrayed the version of us we spent our whole lives building. She covered her mouth, sobbing. I know. And you took away my right to choose how to live the rest of my life. I added, because you made decisions for both of us without my knowledge. I'm sorry, she cried, shoulders shaking. Silas, I'm so sorry. I stood then, more slowly than I used to, feeling each year in my knees. I'm filing for divorce, Mabel. Her breath hitched so hard I thought she might collapse. No, she gasped. No, Silas, please, don't say that. Let's talk to a counselor. Let's talk to the pastor. We can fix this. We can... I can't stay married to someone who didn't want to be married to me, I said softly. Not anymore. She shook her head violently. I don't want to be married to you. I still do. I never stopped wanting our life. You wanted both lives, I answered, and that's not marriage. That's greed wrapped in sentiment. She sank onto the steps, burying her face in her hands. I'll tell the kids it was all my fault, she sobbed. I'll tell them I'm sorry. I'll beg them to forgive me. Just don't leave me, Silas. I'm scared. Her fear didn't move me, not the way it would have years ago. You should have been scared before you lied, I said, voice breaking despite myself. Not after you got caught. She looked up at me with hollow eyes. What am I supposed to do? She whispered. I hesitated, then answered truthfully. That's for you to figure out, Mabel. Just like you figure out how to live two lives at once. I stepped back toward the screen door. I'll have a lawyer send papers. You can keep your share of the house. But I won't step foot in it again. Silas, she cried, reaching out a hand. I gently closed the door, and for the first time in decades, I locked it behind me. Later that day, Zoe arrived at Jamal's house again. She had spoken with Mabel. I could tell just by looking at her. She had cried, yelled, tried to reason with her mother, and been left with a heart full of broken pieces. Zoe sat beside me on the couch. Daddy, she's destroyed. I know. She says she never meant to fall in love with Arthur. That doesn't make it better. Zoe wiped her eyes. Mama says she only stayed with him because he made her feel young again. Seen again. Wanted again. My jaw tightened. I was right there beside her for 48 years. She was seen. She just stopped looking back. Zoe leaned against me, exhausted. I hate this. I hate everything about it. Me too, I whispered. We stayed like that a long while. Family, broken, bruised, but still together on the side that hadn't caused a break. That evening, I drove to Pine Ridge myself. Not to see Mabel, but to enter the house one final time. When I stepped inside, everything felt different. The pictures on the wall, wedding photos, birth announcements, holiday gatherings, looked like relics from someone else's life. A life I no longer recognized. I walked through the room slowly, touching the furniture, the framed memories, the worn quilt Mabel had sewn years ago. In the bedroom, her perfume still lingered faintly in the air. I opened my dresser drawer and packed a small suitcase with my clothes, a few important papers, a couple of keepsakes the kids had made when they were little. And then, as I was about to leave, I saw something tucked beneath the bed. A box. I pulled it out. Inside were letters, cards, notes, dozens of them, some addressed to Grace Miller, some addressed to my sweetheart, some signed by Arthur. And at the bottom, one letter in Mabel's handwriting I'd never seen. It wasn't addressed to me. It wasn't addressed to Arthur. It wasn't addressed to anyone. It simply read, to the woman I became when I stopped being myself. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the letter trembling in my hands. There it was, the truth behind the truth, the part of her I never saw, the fracture that widened into a canyon, the storm that destroyed everything. I folded the letter back into box, placed it exactly where I'd found it, and stood. With my suitcase in hand, I stepped out of the house, locked the door, and walked away. And as I reached the truck, another realization hit me. This story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The consequences of Mabel's lies were only beginning to unfold. And the person who would have to face them now was me. The next few days slid by like mud, thick and slow. I spent most of my time at Jamal's, though I didn't want to burden his young family. His kids tiptoed around the edges of the living room, sensing the heaviness in the air. Jamal tried to distract me with work updates from the shop. Leah made warm meals she hoped I'd eat. Zoe visited almost every night after school. But no matter how hard they tried to soften the edges, the truth remained sharp. By the end of the week, I found myself pacing. All day, every day. Not angry, not hysterical, just restless, trapped inside a life I no longer recognized. On the seventh night, Jamal came to sit beside me on the back porch, just as he had when he was a boy with scraped knees and questions too big for his little body. "Daddy, you can't stay here forever," he said gently. I nodded. "I know. We'll help you find a place. Or you can stay with us longer if you need to. Whatever you want." "It's not about where I stay," I said. "It's about what comes next." Jamal studied me quietly. "Have you talked to a lawyer?" "Not yet." "Do you want me to call someone?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I think I do." He squeezed my shoulder. "We'll take care of it." There was comfort in that, knowing my children were stepping in to protect me, to guide me, when all my life it had been the other way around. But the truth is, no lawyer, no legal process could undo what had already been done. My marriage wasn't cracked. It was shattered. 2 days later, I met with attorney Malcolm Rivers, a man who practiced law in Pine Ridge for nearly 40 years. He was slow-moving, quiet-spoken, the kind of fellow who always looked like he was about to offer you a peppermint from his coat pocket. He listened without interrupting as I told the whole story. From the first suspicious late-night text to the hotel room door closing in my face. When I finished, he sighed long and deep. "Silas, I'm sorry you're going through this. I never imagined Mabel would do something like that." "Neither did I." He folded his hands on the desk. "Do you want reconciliation or dissolution?" "Dissolution," I said without hesitation. He nodded. "Then we'll proceed. The courts will want a statement. Division of assets. Proof of the deception will help, though adultery laws don't operate the way they used to." He paused, studying my face. "Are you prepared for how public this will become?" I swallowed hard. "It's a small town. It's already public." He nodded slowly. "Very well. I'll file the petition this week." Before I left, he looked at me with a softer gaze. "You've done nothing wrong, Silas. Don't forget that." But I wasn't sure I believed him, because somewhere deep inside, a seed of doubt had taken root. A question I tried not to ask. How long had Mabel been unhappy, and why hadn't I seen it? That afternoon, I drove back to the shop for the first time since everything happened. Dixon Metal Works had always been my sanctuary, full of sparks, metal, fire, and the comfort of routine. Now, walking through those big metal doors felt like stepping into a past life. The employees paused when they saw me, their faces full of sympathy, awkwardness, and that quiet pity small towns never bother to hide. Jamal met me halfway across the shop floor. "You sure you want to be here today, Dad?" "I need to be somewhere," I said. He nodded and put me to work sorting a shipment of raw steel. For the next hour, I lifted heavy bars, stacked them in neat rows, measured angles, and listened to the metal hum under my hands. It felt good. Not emotionally, no work could fix that, but physically grounding. Real, honest. But then, sometime around mid-afternoon, a familiar voice approached from behind. "Mr. Dixon?" I turned. It was Leah. She must have dropped by to bring Jamal something, but she looked uneasy, twisting her wedding ring nervously. "Leah, everything all right?" She hesitated. "Mabel came to the house." My stomach tightened when, an hour ago, Jamal wasn't home yet. She asked if she could talk to me. I braced myself. What did she say? Leah swallowed. She said she doesn't understand why the kids are taking your side. I let out a breath through my teeth. Our side? This isn't a football game. She said she made a mistake, but doesn't deserve to lose her family over it. She wanted to know if she could come over for dinner this weekend to talk. I stared at Leah in disbelief. Did you tell her yes? She shook her head. No. I said I needed to ask Jamal. I nodded tightly. Good. But my insides twisted with an ache I couldn't name. Anger? Sadness? Disappointment? All of it. She still thought this was something that could be patched up with a casserole and conversation. She still thought she could repair decades of betrayal with a single evening at the table where she once sat as a wife, mother, and grandmother. But that life, that table, that version of us, it was gone. That night, I lay awake on the small fold-out bed in Jamal's guest room, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles. Every creak of the house sounded like a memory. Every memory sounded like a knife. I tried to think of anything else. Work, the grandkids, fishing at Lark's Pond, the smell of metal heating in the forge. But the moment I relaxed, the hotel door flashed before my eyes again. Her blouse, that man's hand on her waist, her startled whisper, Silas? What? How? And the final blow, I told him you were dead. Those words lodged themselves in my chest like hot iron cooling too quick. Hard, unforgiving, permanent. Around 3 a.m, I got up and stepped outside onto the porch. The April air was cool, the crickets humming low in the grass. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Zoe, wrapped in a blanket. Can't sleep either? She asked softly. No. She sat beside me. I keep thinking if we'd noticed earlier, if we'd asked her more questions, maybe this could have been stopped. I shook my head. Your mother made her choices long before we could have done anything. Zoe rested her head on my shoulder. Daddy, she's really losing her mind. She's losing control, I corrected gently. Not the same thing. Zoe's voice wavered. She said she feels like she's the victim. I closed my eyes, letting the night breeze cool the anger building behind them. She isn't. I know, Zoe whispered, but she doesn't. We sat quietly, watching the stars. Pine Ridge skies always held more stars than anywhere else. Maybe because the town was small enough to let the world breathe. After several minutes, Zoe asked, What happens now? I exhaled slowly. We moved forward, one step at a time. And Mama? My jaw clenched. She faces what she created. Zoe nodded, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. I'm scared for her, she admitted. And for you. I'll be fine, I said. I've been through hard things before. But not this, she whispered. She was right. This was different. This was the kind of pain that changed a man's shape. 2 days later, the situation cracked open even wider. I was at the shop when Jamal came running over from the front office, face pale, eyes wide. Dad, you need to hear this. My heart jumped. What happened? It's Mama, he said, voice tight. She called, crying. Someone in Memphis told Arthur about the divorce papers. I froze. So he knows? Jamal nodded. He confronted her. She said he ended things for good. Good, I thought. Let him walk away from the mess she created. But Jamal wasn't finished. She said she might leave Pine Ridge altogether. Move in with her sister out in Nashville for a while. I looked down at my hands, stained with metal dust. Let her, I said. It might be the best thing for everyone. Jamal exhaled. There's more. I raised my eyes. She said she wants to see you before she leaves. My muscles tightened all over. No. That's what I told her, Jamal said. But she insisted. She said there are things she needs to confess. Things she didn't say at the hotel. I felt the room tilt. More secrets? More lies? More truths buried underneath the mountain she'd already dropped on my life? No. No more. It doesn't matter, I said firmly. There's nothing she can say that changes anything. Jamal hesitated. Dad, what if it's something you should know? I stared at him, my pulse hammering, because as much as I wanted to believe, I was done with Mabel's lies. A cold part of me whispered that he might be right. What if there was more? What if the worst wasn't behind me? What if the life I thought I knew had even deeper fractures waiting to split open? I closed my eyes and drew a long breath. Tell her, I said slowly, I'll speak to her. And just like that, another door opened. One I wasn't sure I was ready to walk through. But I would, because whatever Mabel had left to say, it was time to hear it. I didn't go to her right away. I waited 2 full days, half out of stubbornness, half out of fear what else she could possibly reveal. I kept telling myself that nothing she said could wound me worse than what I already knew. But that was a lie. Pain has a way of finding new openings, new cracks to pour itself into. On the evening of the second day, after the sun slipped behind the pine trees, I called Mabel and told her I'd come by the house the next morning. Her voice trembled to the phone line, a mix of relief and dread. Thank you, Silas, she whispered. I didn't answer. I just hung up. Jamal and Zoe offered to come with me, but I told them no. Whatever this next chapter was, it needed to be faced alone. They understood, though reluctantly. That night, sleep avoided me again. I sat in the dark guest room, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the soft ticking of the clock on the wall, the faint whistles of wind brushing past the window. I wondered how many more of these nights I'd have to endure before the ache stopped echoing inside my chest. By sunrise, I was exhausted, not from lack of rest, but from the weight of everything I carried. Still, I drove to the house. My house. Our house. The driveway looked the same, but nothing felt the same. The azalea bushes Mabel planted years ago were blooming bright pink against the fence. The wind chime near the porch clinked softly, a sound I used to find comforting. Now it sounded like a memory I wished I could forget. I knocked, though I still had a key. Somehow it didn't feel like my right anymore. The door opened slowly. Mabel stood there with puffy eyes, her hair pulled back in a loose bun, wearing one of her older cardigans, the deep purple one she used to garden in. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Silas, she breathed. Come in. I stepped past her, feeling the house shift around me like a living thing adjusting to an unwelcome presence. The smell of lavender candles hit me first, one of her habits when she felt anxious. A half-full mug of tea sat on the coffee table. A blanket was folded neatly on the couch. She'd been waiting. I didn't sit. I stayed standing, hands in my pockets, heart steady but guarded. What did you want to tell me? I asked. Mabel reached for back an armchair, gripping it as though she might collapse without support. There's more, she said quietly. More than what you saw at the hotel. More than what I told you. I stiffened. I figured. And you deserve the truth, she continued. All of it. Even the parts I'm ashamed of. I didn't speak. I didn't encourage or interrupt. I just waited. She pulled in a shaky breath. It didn't start 2.5 years ago. I blinked once, slow. Then when she didn't answer immediately. Instead, tears welled in her eyes again, spilling over before she could wipe them away. Silas, it started 7 years ago. My breath froze. 7 years. 7. That was before she'd even retired. Before she began her book club nights, the sudden girls' trips, the computer lessons. It was before I ever noticed a single crack. How? I asked, voice low. She swallowed. Do you remember when I went to that state educators conference in Memphis back in 2013? The one for curriculum development. I nodded slowly. That's where I met Arthur, she whispered. We were assigned to the same discussion group. At first we just talked about the job, about retirement planning, about the kids. But he was kind to me. He listened. Her voice faltered. You didn't, she added softly. I felt the air leave my lungs. I'm not blaming you, she said quickly, seeing my expression harden. I'm explaining. You were busy, Silas. You built the business into something huge. You were always at the shop. You'd come home tired. You'd fall asleep in your chair. I miss feeling seen. I clenched my jaw. So you found someone else who would see you. She winced. I didn't plan it. I didn't hope for it. It just happened. That's what people say when they don't want to admit they made choices. I replied sharply. She absorbed the blow without defending herself. You're right, she whispered. It was a choice, one I made again and again, and each time it became harder to stop, because every lie I told pinned me deeper into the life I created with him. She sat down slowly, trembling. For the first 2 years, it wasn't physical, she said. It was just talking, sharing things I should have shared with you. Then when Mama died and the kids moved out and I retired, suddenly there was this emptiness inside me I didn't know how to fill. You could have talked to me, I said. We had decades of talking. Decades. I was ashamed, she whispered. Ashamed for wanting something different. Something new. Ashamed of the fact that I wasn't happy with the life I thought I'd always wanted. I stared at her. 7 years, I repeated, trying to wrap my mind around it. 7 years of lies, of pretending, of leading 2 lives. Yes, she whispered, and you never planned to tell me. No, she said honestly, I never did. There it was, the raw truth, the kind that burns all the way down. I turned away from her, because looking at her felt like looking at the ruins of a home I once knew. Then she said something that made every muscle in my body tense. And that's not everything. My pulse kicked. What else? She wiped her face with trembling fingers. You remember when you and Jamal rebuilt the shop after the flood in '95? When the expansion started pushing into the land by the creek? I frowned. What about it? You always said the land behind the shop was yours alone because your father willed it to you. But the old deeds, they weren't clear. They were messy, hard to trace. I stiffened. Mabel, what are you saying? She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. There was a second deed, she whispered. One your father signed late in life, giving partial ownership of that backlot to Marcus. I turned to stone. Marcus, my brother who'd always been jealous of the shop, always felt he deserved a piece of what I built. That deed doesn't exist, I said. I went through every paper Daddy left after he passed. I know, she said, tears sliding down her cheeks. Because I hid it. The room went still. What? I hid it, she repeated. Before you even saw it. Before Daddy's things were fully sorted. I found the deed in an envelope mixed in with old tax forms. I knew what it meant. I knew Marcus would use it to claim part of your land. Or worse, try to take control of the business. My heart hammered like a steel drum. So you hid it, I said. From me. From my brothers. From everyone. Yes. Why? Because you were fragile then, she whispered. The flood had nearly wiped you out. The business was hanging by a thread. If Marcus came in with a legal claim, you would have broken under the pressure. And I couldn't bear to watch that happen. My hands curled into fists. So you lied, I said, again, before Arthur, before the double life, before all of it. You were already hiding things. She closed her eyes. I kept it buried in my closet for 23 years. And you're telling me now, I said slowly, just because everything else fell apart? No, she said, meeting my gaze. I'm telling you because Arthur found it. The world dropped out from under me. What do you mean he found it? When I said I wasn't ready for him to come to Pine Ridge, when I always insisted on meeting him in Memphis, it wasn't just guilt. He wanted to see where I lived. But I didn't want him snooping. And last month he did. A bitter taste filled my mouth. He found the deed in my closet. He asked about it. I panicked. I told him it was old, irrelevant, but he looked it up. He knows it's valid. I stared at her. And since he left me, she continued, voice cracking, I don't know what he'll do with it. I felt the weight of 100 storms settle on my shoulders. Arthur Blackwood, the man who thought I was dead, the man who spent 7 years unknowingly living inside my wife's deception, the man she built a second life around, now holding a 23-year-old deed that could jeopardize the land behind my shop. My father built that business, I said quietly. I rebuilt it after the flood. Jamal grew it. Isaiah and Ellie might inherit it someday. And now a man I've never met might try to take a piece of it. Yes, Mabel whispered. I'm afraid he might. A slow burning fury stirred inside me. Not wild, not reckless. Cold, focused. This isn't just betrayal anymore, I said. This is damage. This is threat. Mabel sobbed. I never wanted it to get this far. It got this far because you kept digging. Lie after lie. Hole after hole. I turned toward the door. Silas, please, she cried, reaching out. Where are you going? I didn't look back. To clean up your mess, I said, before it becomes mine. I stepped out of the house without another word, and as the door closed behind me, one truth settled in my chest like a burning coal. I wasn't just fighting heartbreak anymore. I was fighting for what was left of my life. When I stepped out of that house, my house, though it no longer felt like it, I wasn't the same man who'd walked in. The betrayal had cut me deep, but this was something different. This was an attack on the legacy I'd built with my own hands. On the land my father sweated over. On the business Jamal had poured his youth into. Arthur Blackwood might not have intended to become my enemy, but with that deed in his possession, he was standing on the wrong side of the line I couldn't afford to ignore. I drove straight to Jamal's, anger simmering low and steady like coal in a forge. He saw it in my face the moment I walked through the door. What happened? He asked, stepping forward. Where's Zoe? At the school. Daddy, you're scaring me. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table. Your mother hid something from us. Something big. Something that could hurt the business. Jamal stiffened. What are you talking about? I told him everything, from the second deed to Arthur finding it. With each sentence, his jaw tightened. By the time I reached the end, he was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. She had a legal document for 23 years, he whispered, disbelief mixing with fury. Does Uncle Marcus know? No, I said, but if Arthur decides to use it, Marcus might find out fast. Jamal stood abruptly, pacing. We need a lawyer. We already have one. I mean another one, he said, a specialist, someone who handles property disputes. I nodded. That was my thought too. He grabbed his keys. I'll call around. There's a firm in Jackson that handled that big land dispute last year for the Thompson family. They'll know what to do. I exhaled slowly. Good. Action helped. Movement helped. Sitting still made the storm inside me worse. But even with Jamal taking the lead, the weight on my chest didn't lift, because something didn't make sense. Jamal, I said, rubbing my forehead. Why would Arthur care about land behind a metal shop in Pine Ridge? What use is that to a retired history teacher from Memphis? Jamal frowned, unless someone told him its value. I looked up sharply. What do you mean? The shop expansion last year, he said. Remember when we installed the new hydraulic cutter? The blueprints were online for a while because the contractor messed up the privacy setting on the site. Anyone could have seen the layout, including the land behind it. A chill ran through me. He could think the land is worth something, I murmured. Or he could think it's leverage, Jamal added. A way to hurt Mama back. Or you. That last part sat wrong in my gut. Does Arthur blame me? I asked. Jamal shrugged. He believed Mama was a widow. Found out she lied. Found out her husband was alive. And then found out she was lying to him while still married. Some men don't react well to being humiliated. I knew that to be true. I'd seen grown men get violent over far less. Do you think he'd come here? I asked. Jamal didn't answer immediately. Maybe, he finally said. Depends on what kind of man he really is. And that was the problem. I had no idea what kind of man Arthur Blackwood was. The next day brought answers I didn't like. Attorney Rivers called at 10 in the morning. Silas, I spoke to the courthouse in Memphis. That deed your wife mentioned? It's real. My chest tightened. And is it valid? Legally? Yes. Practically? Maybe not. But we need to act fast. If Arthur files a claim, Marcus could join it. And that would get messy. Very messy. I won't let Marcus anywhere near my business, I said, voice hardening. I know, he replied, which is why we need to file before they do. Do you think Arthur will? There was a long pause. Silas, men who feel deceived don't always think rationally. My thoughts drifted unwillingly to Memphis, to the cafe, to that hotel room, to Arthur's face when he realized the entire story of Grace Dixon had been a lie. A man humiliated is a man unpredictable. Do what you need to do, I told Attorney Rivers, and keep me informed. I hung up, but the tension didn't ease. If anything, it grew. Around lunchtime, I stepped outside the shop to get some fresh air. Spring sunlight filtered through the pine trees. Everything looked normal, peaceful, but my gut said trouble was coming. I didn't have to wait long. A silver sedan pulled into the lot, dust kicking up behind it. I recognized the car immediately. I'd seen it outside the Memphis hotel. Arthur Blackwood. He stepped out, wearing a neat blazer despite the warm weather, his silver hair combed back sharply. There was no trace of hesitation in his posture. No embarrassment. No guilt. Only purpose. I walked toward him, spine straight, jaw clenched. He raised a hand in greeting, like we were two old friends meeting for coffee. "Mr. Dixon," he said. "Silas, may we speak?" "We're speaking," I replied. He smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. "I understand this is awkward for both of us." "No," I said. "Awkward is when you wear mismatched socks to church. This is something else." Arthur let out a humorless breath. "Fair enough." He looked around the yard. The stacks of steel, the sparks flying inside the shop, the workers glancing our way, and I could see something shift in his expression. Calculation. "This is a fine operation you built," he said. "Impressive, really." "What do you want, Arthur?" His eyes returned to mine. "Answers," he said simply, "and perhaps resolution." "You had 7 years to ask Grace for answers," I replied. "Why bring them to me now?" "Because I learned she lied to me from the very beginning," he said, voice tightening. "She said you were dead. She told my children that you had passed. She let me hold her while she cried about it. She built an entire world out of stories. I didn't flinch. She lied to both of us." "Yes," he said softly, "but in different ways." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded envelope. My pulse quickened. "I believe this belongs to you. I didn't take it immediately. Is that the deed?" "It is." "Why bring it to me?" He studied my face for a long moment. "Because despite everything," he said slowly, "I don't want to be the man she turned me into. Angry, spiteful, vindictive. I came here to return what isn't mine." That threw me. "You're not going to use it?" I asked, genuinely unsure. "No," he said. "I had every right to. Trust me. Every instinct told me to hurt her the way she hurt me. But the truth is, I'm old, Silas. Too old to spend the rest of my years fighting battles that aren't mine." I stared at him, trying to see if this was another layer of deception. But he looked tired. Really tired. "You don't want anything from me?" I asked. He shook his head. "I didn't come to punish you," he said. "You're as much a victim in this as I am. I came because I want peace. Closure." He held out the envelope again. This time I took it. The paper felt heavy. Too heavy for something so thin. "I'm sorry," Arthur said quietly, "for my part in all this, for falling into something I didn't understand, for contributing to the fracture in your life. I appreciate that," I said honestly. "But you didn't break my marriage, Arthur. It was already broken. You were just standing in the space where the cracks were widest." He nodded slowly. Then he turned to leave. But before he reached his car, he paused. "One last thing, Silas," he said over his shoulder. "Grace told me once that you were the best man she ever knew, that you were loyal, steady, kind. She said you built your world with fire and iron, and your heart the same way." He offered a sad smile. "She never deserved you, and I think she knows that now." With that, he got into his car and drove away. I stood there in the gravel, the envelope clutched in my hand, feeling a tremor of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. Not complete. Not enough to heal anything. but enough to stop the ground from shaking beneath me. Jamal came out from the shop, squinting toward the road. Was that? Yeah, I said. What did he want? I held up the envelope. He returned the deed. Jamal stared. He what? I nodded, exhaling deeply. It's over, son. The land's ours. The business is safe. Jamal let out a long breath and gripped my shoulder. Dad, that's incredible. Incredible, I echoed, and unexpected. We walked back toward the shop, side by side. For the first time in weeks, the weight on my chest felt lighter. Not gone, but shifting. But as we reached the door, something in me hesitated. Because even though Arthur had stepped out of the story, Mabel hadn't. And she still had one more choice left to make. A choice that could change everything. 2 days passed after Arthur returned the deed. For the first time in months, the house inside my chest felt quiet. Bruised, yes, but steady again. I told Zoe and Jamal the land was safe, and the way their shoulders eased told me just how deeply the fear had rooted in them too. But one thing still lingered like a shadow at my back. Mabel. She hadn't called since my visit. No texts. No attempt to show up at Jamal's or the shop. It was as if she'd vanished from Pine Ridge entirely, though her presence still clung to the edges of my thoughts like a scent that wouldn't fade. On the third morning, a soft knock came at Jamal's door. I knew it was her before he opened it. She stood on the porch wearing the same cardigan, her hair pulled tight, her hands clasped in front of her like she was bracing for judgment. Silas, she said, voice barely above a whisper. May I speak to you? Jamal stepped aside, uncertain. I moved past him and walked onto the porch, closing the door behind me so the children wouldn't hear. What is it, Mabel? She looked up slowly, eyes red, tired, defeated. I heard Arthur came by, she said, and that he gave you the deed. He did. She nodded, wiping her cheek with trembling fingers. Then it settled, the last thing I broke is mended. I didn't answer. She took a shaky breath. Silas, I'm leaving Pine Ridge. Today, I packed a suitcase. Zoe said she'd drive me to Nashville. I won't make this any harder for you. You don't need my permission, I said softly. You haven't needed it for a long time. Her face crumpled, but she steadied herself. I know you'll never forgive me, she whispered. And I don't blame you. I lied, and when lies piled up higher than I could carry, I crawled under them instead of coming clean. She swallowed hard. I love the life we built, Silas. But somewhere along the way, I stopped loving myself inside it. And instead of telling you that truth, I built a new one out of cowardice. I tightened my hands on the porch railing. You should have told me you were hurting. I know, she whispered. And I regret that until the day I die. There was nothing left to say, not for lack of words, but because the story between us had already ended, long before the hotel door opened. She hesitated, then reached into her pocket and held out her wedding ring. Would you take it? I can't carry it with me anymore. I stared at the ring, the symbol of 48 years. Births, losses, dinners, fights, Christmas mornings, quiet nights, a lifetime. But symbols lose their meaning when the truth that held them together falls apart. I don't need it back, I said gently. Keep it or don't. But it's yours now, not mine. Tears streamed down her face. She nodded, slipping the ring back into her pocket, like it was burning her palm. Goodbye, Silas. Goodbye, Mabel. She turned and walked down the porch steps, her figure shrinking as she moved toward Zoe's car. My daughter hugged her mother tightly, though with sadness weighing her down. Then the door shut, the car pulled away, and just like that, the house I once built with a partner became only a structure, a place where memories lived, but the life inside them didn't. I stood on that porch a long time, watching dust settle on the road, letting the quiet wrap around me. Not grief, not anger, just acceptance. Some stories don't end cleanly. Some simply reach a point where you stop turning the pages. When I finally stepped back inside, Jamal looked at me carefully. You okay, Dad? I nodded. I will be. And for the first time since the day I faked that trip to Memphis, I knew it was true. Thank you for watching. Before you go, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. A new chapter is coming soon, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next.